There is no end in sight to the war in Ukraine, and the longer it goes, the more complicated it seems to get. G20 world leaders meeting right now, and it has become all about the war, this meeting. Leaders are looking to further isolate Russia, but will it work? Complicating things even further, a missile that struck Poland does not appear to have been fired by Russia. The declaration by NATO does alleviate immediate concerns of an expansion into neighbouring countries of the conflict. Jens Stoltenberg says there's no evidence that Russia is planning to or intends to attack NATO countries, but still blames Russia for the incident. The missile? Well, the suggestion is that it came from the Ukrainians by mistake, but that's something that Volodymyr Zelensky has denied. Let's go live to our political editor now, Andrew Clennell. He's in Bali at this G20 summit. There's been a lot of talk about Russia, leaders making very impassioned public statements and private ones that they're going to further isolate Russia. But where is all this talk going, Andrew?
Well, who's to say? I guess the leaders, apart from Russia, hope that Russia withdraw. That's what they say the answer is. That's certainly what Anthony Albanese said last night, and they believe that at a forum like this there can be some pressure put on. Russia can be isolated. We saw Sergei Lavrov leave on Tuesday night. Then we saw that Poland missile strike and an emergency meeting chaired by Joe Biden of G7 and NATO leaders. But then it became clear it was most likely from a Ukrainian defence system. Having said that, the US and others still blamed Russia in the sense that it was trying to counter a number of Russian missiles that had been fired, even as the G20 was taking place. A declaration from the G20 last night at its conclusion that most nations believe that the Ukraine war should end. They were never going to get China and Russia over the line on this one, but Anthony Albanese believes it will have an effect.
Prime Minister, is there anything that came out of this G20 summit that made you think Vladimir Putin can and will be stopped when it comes to Ukraine?
What I saw come out of it was the declaration today. That's the first time you've had a statement like that come out of a body like the G20, which of course Russia is a member of. In that context, Russia is increasingly isolated. That is what the G20 showed.
And today we travel to Thailand, Laura, to the APEC leaders meeting, the third summit in a week. President Xi from China will be there. Anthony Albanese will be there. The US President Joe Biden will not be there. And you can bet that this will be a point of discussion again as world leaders look to President Xi to intervene with Vladimir Putin. We saw Anthony Albanese in his bilateral and Joe Biden request that action. If you're relying on President Xi, you're probably in a bit of trouble, aren't you? But Anthony Albanese was asked about this last night.
Will he, do you think, try to exercise some leverage with Vladimir Putin to at least talk about peace?
Well, I used the opportunity of the bilateral with President Xi to encourage him to use his influence to promote peace and to pressure Russia into withdrawal from Ukraine. That's the solution here.
I would have loved to have known what that answer was behind closed doors, whether he would use that pressure. No sign of it yet, as you say, Andrew, but we have seen quite unusual display in front of the cameras. China's President Xi Jinping confronting the Canadian leader. This is as aggressive as it gets in diplomatic terms.
Yes, this might be a lesson in why Anthony Albanese told us what he said in that bilateral with President Xi, but he didn't say what President Xi responded, because this is what happens. Now, I heard you mention earlier, Rishi Sunak is in on all this in the sense that his meeting after this exchange with President Xi was cancelled. There's no suggestion that I can see that it's linked to the Trudeau confrontation. They're talking about scheduling as well with the Poland missiles happening, but you do have to wonder. Have a look at this. This is just gold footage, really, of this exchange. It appears Justin Trudeau, who wasn't given a bilat had a discussion on the sidelines with President Xi. It was then leaked to the press, and this is what Xi Jinping is blowing up about.
If there is sincerity on your part,
free and open and frank dialogue, and that is what we will continue to have. We will continue to look to work constructively together, but there will be things we will disagree on, and we will have to
Let's create the conditions first.
Well, there was a handshake at the end there, and President Xi can speak and understands English perfectly, but still chose to do that through an interpreter. Even so, under more normalised diplomatic relations, the Prime Minister Anthony Albanese will meet with the French. I'm not sure whether that's today or tomorrow, but this is interesting as well because, you know, it's a change in personnel in Australia. He branded Scott Morrison a liar. He doesn't think that of Anthony Albanese, so it should be quite a pleasant meeting.
No, the meeting with the French President Emmanuel Macron was last night.
Oh, right, got it.
As was the meeting with Anthony Albanese and Rishi Sunak, because we're about to fly out, Laura. So it just became clear from the comments of Anthony Albanese after this meeting that even though they missed out on the subs contract, there are going to be other defence deals. And it was interesting too, Anthony Albanese was suggesting that in the strategic defence review that will be out in March, there will be an intermediate step on submarines before we get to the AUKUS nuclear submarine. So I can imagine the French would want a piece of that. It also became clear at the G20 that both the US and the UK are lobbying Australia at the moment to be the ones to supply us with nuclear submarines, or at least the technology. I guess why wouldn't they be? There's a lot of money involved. This is what Anthony Albanese said about his meeting with Emmanuel Macron.
I'm not going into the specifics of equipment and those issues, but France, of course, is an Indian Ocean power and a Pacific power as well. And we spoke about how we could have an increased engagement and cooperation in defence and security matters, and I look forward to that.
So, Laura, it was a flurry of bilats for Anthony Albanese yesterday. Last night he met the Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi as well. He said that he would be visiting India in March. Of course, India takes up the chairmanship of the G20. It'll be very interesting to see where we are on the China issue and on the Russian-Ukraine issue at this time next year when that G20 takes place.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Look, Cambodia, Bali, Thailand for you, Andrew. It strikes me that you are so close yet so far away from a holiday in some of these beautiful locations, but we appreciate your time. Looking good. Can't see any sweat.